it's Bronwyn from Rap, and today I want to show you a few processing tricks to try out on the main Mixbus. Now, I'm working on a great track called Blame from 7 Sound Sample Pack Darkest Pop, and it's available at rloops.com. There are so many different opinions on whether or not to use processing on the Mixbus, and quite honestly, sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. But it really just depends on the project I'm working on. So today I'm going to show you how to work with a few processors on the main Mixbus. If you're going to use processors on your Mixbus, then you must make sure that they are inserted right from the beginning of your mix session so that you mix into them. The key to Mixbus processing is also consistency. So use the same or similar chains for every song in the album that you're mixing. You can always add or take away processors that aren't working in the chain on certain songs. It really just depends, again, on the material you're working with. So let's have a look at my chain. The first thing in the chain is an EQ, and what I use this EQ for is to cut out and remove any unnecessary frequencies. So I usually like to set the filter in at around about a nice low cut at around about 40 hertz. So everything from 40 hertz and below is really cut out and removed. And I put in a very steep slope, 48 dB per octave. The next thing in my chain is a compressor. And, you know, you're going to hear the word glue quite a bit in modern mixing. Now, generally, it's used to describe a type of processing that's usually applied to our master bus or even subgroups that help the individual elements basically sound as if they exist within the same sonic space and the same sonic context. The whole idea of this particular compressor is that you don't want a lot of gain reduction happening. You can see my settings over here. The threshold anywhere between 4 and around about -4 and -12 is good. A very, very gentle ratio. I've got nothing on the makeup gain. I've got a sort of medium attack time and a release time. You can see that my knee over here is also not all the way soft, but it's also not hard. And I've just tweaked. I've actually added in, because a lot of the times on my tracks, I like to add in color. So I particularly chose this compressor because it's modeled after one of my favorites, which is the SSL Mixbus compressor. And I like the saturation, the distortion that I can dial in here. I put it onto clip because it gives me a really nice subtle kind of distortion, and it adds in that color that I'm looking for. So when you're looking to use a compressor on your Mixbus, you want something that you can really tweak the threshold and the ratio with. You need something that will also help you with the attack and release time. So you don't want to be choosing a compressor that only has a few knobs on it. You want to be able to have some full control, as much control as you can over your compressor. Right, so the next thing that I move on to in my Mixbus chain is an EQ, another EQ. So for my first EQ, it's there to remove any low unwanted frequencies. The next thing in the chain is the compressor to glue everything. And then I use another EQ, and this EQ is used to sweeten or enhance my mix. Now, the position of each EQ before or after compression, so the EQ pre, which is before, or post, which is after compression, it really helps to produce a really different sound. And it also introduces different tonal quality and coloration. So as a rule, if you use EQ in front of your compressor, it'll produce a nice warm round tone, while using EQ after your compressor produces a clearer sound. In this instance, I'm going for a tube EQ. Again, as I told you, I like on my Mixbus, particularly with pop, I like to use a lot of color. And in this instance, I've decided to go for a tube EQ. I just really like the sound of it. And you can see over here how I've boosted and enhanced my mix. You can see the different settings that I've utilized in order to really make the mix pop a bit. We're going to hear all of these. I'm just going through the chain at the moment. We're going to hear all of these as I go along. Now, instead of using your Mixbus processing as a band-aid to repair a dull mix, it's always way better to go back and tweak each of the individual channels. You know, if you're finding that something isn't working on your vocal track, for example, then you could go onto that vocal track. You can go and tweak the settings that are there, or if something is, again, perhaps even on your guitar loop or something like that, then, you know, it's better to be able to go back into each individual element rather than use your main mix bus to try and fix things. The whole idea of the main mix bus processing is just to help create some color and a nice sonic space and bring that mix into to glue that mix together, really. A lot of songs call for clean, polished sound. Others actually sound better with a little bit of grit and a little bit of soul. So for me, I like to add a splash of color to my mix in special circumstances. And for the most part, the EQ and the compression settings will remain the same. And then I'll use either my Kramer tape. I really like this Kramer tape. Or I will use a tube amp. Now, this tube amp, you probably hear it on my voice, really can fatten up and warm up the mix. You just, you know, there's so many different ways. You can use an overdrive plugin as well to bring in a bit of that analog warmth. There are so many different ways for you to, you know, really bring the best out of your song. So the next thing that happens in my chain is I'll put in a limiter. And again, you know, to limit, not to limit. The idea for me of any limiting on my main bus is just to manage some peaks. But I usually will bounce out two versions, one with a limiter on it and the other without, and I'll leave the loudness maximizing to mastering. So there you have it. It's my basic processing chain on a mix bus. I'm going to play the track, and I'm going to just introduce each of these things one at a time. I'm actually going to move my limiter to the end over there so we can see. And let me just move that for a moment. Whoops. Okay. And you'll also notice that I have a multimeter. I love my multimeter. I love watching the goniometer and the correlation meters. I've got LUFS, True Peak, and RMS meters. And I can just make sure. I also have a spectrum analyzer here, which is fantastic. And I can just make sure that my levels are sitting consistently and within international standards. So let me bypass everything over here. And one at a time, I'm going to introduce it, and you can hear the changes it makes to the mix. Here we go.
I'm sorry, now that I failed, I should have told you the truth. Break me, I know I deserve bad things around me to understand. I'm sorry, now that I failed, I should have told you the truth. Break me, I know I deserve bad things around me to understand.
you have it, my basic processing chain on a Mixbus. I hope you feel a bit inspired and that you're going to go and play around with some plugins and see what you come up with. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again in the next video.
I'm sorry.